I wanted to make another longer video on Daniel chapter 8 and why I believe it's not just a prophecy about Antiochus and Alexander the Great, but it's also a prophecy about a future uh, person. So if you read, if you just read it, it talks about the ram with two horns and the he goat. And you can see in verse 20 it says the ram with the two horns are the kings of Medo and Persia, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. So that first king is talking about Alexander the Great. And so, if you just simply read it, Alexander the Great it's going to look like the ram with two horns, which Medo and Persia, it's going to look like they're unstoppable. They're pushing unstoppable, pushing westward, northward, southward, so that no one can stand before him. But then Alexander the Great comes along and tramples them, smashes them. Right. And so, in verse 14, and this is a key thing, into 2,300 days shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So this is referring back to Antiochus, which was a person that came from those when Alexander the Great's the Greece Empire got broken into four notable ones, which it talks about in verse 8. Antiochus came from one of those four broken ones, and he committed an abomination of desolation and ended the daily sacrifice. And then I believe it was the Maccabees that basically restored or rededicated the temple after that. But it was like that was that 2,300 days shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So there's clearly that fulfillment of it, right? And then you get later on into Daniel chapter 8, and it starts talking about a king of fierce countenance. And Daniel's basically sick. Verse 27 says he fainted, was sick certain days. And then he was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. So he didn't. But look at verse 25. Through his through his policy, that's this king's policy, he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. He shall magnify himself in his heart. By peace he shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. Right. This is not talking about Antiochus. So, and there was Antiochus piece to it, and he did fulfill the near fulfillment of it back in the day. But to understand it completely, you go to Daniel chapters 10 and 11, and Daniel has a vision. Um, it says in verse 14, now I'm to come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days, for yet the vision is for many days. And he goes on to speak um, about, in verse 20, it talks about the prince of Persia, the prince of Grecia. And then in verse 11 is where it really starts getting into it. And it talks about the kings of the north, the kings of the south. And this is where it really starts breaking down that Daniel chapter 8 prophecy. And it's going into like the whole Alexander the Great situation. And then it even gets down into, I think, like verse 21, where it starts talking about Antiochus, the vile person. So it's covering all the beginning pieces of Daniel chapter 8. But then by verse 31, or verse 30 talks about the ships of Chittim shall come against him, and he shall be grieved. And verse 31, arms shall stand up on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary and take away the daily sacrifice. This is talking about um, that beginning, that fulfillment back then, because verse 32 to 35 is talking about the Maccabees, and they basically rededicated, and that's that 2300 day part. But verse 36 is the future fulfillment that we haven't quite seen yet. And I believe this is probably, if you start at Daniel 11:36 and go all the way through chapter 12, this is probably talking about the whole 7 year tribulation, or most of it. Because if you see it, it starts talking about a king of the south and a king of the north coming at him again. But this is not Antiochus. The Antiochus stuff's already over in verse 31. I mean, this is a whole new guy, and you can kind of see that basically if you start going further into Daniel. It says from the time in verse 12 chapter, or yeah, verse 11 chapter 12, it says from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. So the first one was the 2,300 days. That was from when Antiochus did it until the temple was rededicated. This one is talking about 1,290 days. This is talking about the very end of the tribulation. This is a whole different thing, a whole different king, not Antiochus. But it's going to be like what happened back then. I believe if you go and you read, like, I believe this is the end time beast, is what it is. It's going to be like all that. And that's what Revelation kind of, that's why Revelation really takes you back to that, right? We see this beast. You saw him earlier in Daniel too, when there's the vision of the statue, and there's basically different parts of it, and it's that last 10 toes that's the final beast. I think Daniel maybe 7 also talks about it too as the fourth kingdom. But Revelation 13 talks about has 7 heads and 10 horns, and it's like unto a leopard, the feet of a bear, the mouth of a lion. So it has all these attributes. This is basically pointing you directly back to Daniel. What is this beast like? Well, it's like a leopard, the mouth of a lion, the feet of a bear. Well, the leopard was Greece. So if it's like Greece, what did Greece do? Greece was a goat from the west that came and destroyed Persia. So if it's like that, it's going to be a beast that moves rapidly, across the globe. So the feet of a bear. This is the bear was Persia, and Persia had a really strong, dominant military. They crushed people and were brutal. And the mouth of a lion, that's talking about Babylon. So Babylon, if you read, you can read probably Isaiah and Jeremiah, both talk about Babylon. But Nebuchadnezzar, when you read all the different beasts that were, in the Bible, there was one that really spoke a lot. Like Assyria didn't speak a lot. Egypt didn't speak a lot. These different Persia didn't speak a lot, but the one that like blasphemed a lot was Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar hurled a lot of insults, and Paul talks about that too. This end times character is going to be somebody who blasphemes. He's going to be a big mouth. He's not just going to be somebody that conquers. He's going to be a talker too. He's gonna talk about it. He's gonna brag about it, and he's eventually gonna blaspheme God, because he's gonna become so arrogant because of his power that he's going to basically he's going to be like an Antiochus. He's going to think that he's God on earth, and he's going to blaspheme God. So it's going to be like all this, And then if you read further into Revelation, you see that it's it's mystery Babylon. So it's not Babylon, but it's mystery Babylon. And what Babylon did was Babylon crushed all the area around Israel, and they took Israel exile. But they were very powerful. They crushed all of that. Well, how is it mystery Babylon? How is this final beast mystery Babylon? Well, it's actually going to set up shop in Israel. You can read that in Daniel as well. I think it's 11 and 12 as well. It's yeah, I think it's 11 at the end of chapter 11 when it's talking about this guy. He sets up his shop between the seas in Israel or the Gaza area, somewhere right in there. He basically establishes his headquarters right there, and I think that's how it's probably mystery Babylon. And you can see like it's a luxurious deal. Like they're the kings of the earth mourn because it's crushed. And I mean they're really living in luxury. It's talking about scarlet and purple and uh all types of luxury. Which I mean, if let's put this all together, right? There's one today that really kind of talks big, and I don't know if this is I don't know if Trump has anything to do with this or not, but I think let's just look at some similarities. There talks a lot. There's maybe a very near war with Iran. Um, the whole board of peace thing and how the plans for Gaza to turn it into like basically a resort, which that's actually the land of Israel. And uh, yeah, so I mean, if you put all of this together, I mean, it could be somebody else that comes up in the near future. You don't know, but I don't know who it might be. I look at like what the Bible says and some similarities to it. So there's no question that there's two fulfillments of Daniel chapter 8. I mean, if you just read, like I said, chapters 11 and 12, you'll see that. There's a whole different abomination of desolation. There's a whole different timeline. There was a fulfillment back then, and there's the future fulfillment that has yet to come. And it's going to be a beast that's like Greece and has the mouth like Babylon. It hurls insults towards God and things like that. So if you put all that together, and I'll research even more scriptures about it because I'm sure the Bible even talks more about this end times character, but I think this all kind of ties together really. And so yeah, I just wanted to make a longer video about that, but let me know what you think as well. It's good to everybody's got some good ideas, so I think I think this will be that final end times beast, especially when we all see that we're really close to it, and we all kind of wonder like what's that what's that final thing that really sparks the whole fuse to this thing? And I think it's Iran, because they're the ones kind of getting in the way of everything, right? They're the ones kind of holding up the peace. Saudi Arabia and all these other countries, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, they're not holding up like a peace towards anything. They might not love Israel, but they're willing to, have peace agreements, and not be going crazy. Iran, though, they won't do it. Not with the leadership that they have. So I think the key, and I think what this all points to is Iran has to be crushed. And I think if you look at all this prophecy, that would be the spark that ignites the fuse. and it would be a false sort of peace, because I mean, if you crush the big bully, you look like the hero, right? But the only problem is the people don't see that this guy's eventually gonna he's gonna get very arrogant over it, and eventually, there might be a temple, but he's gonna say, "Hey, enough with that stuff. I'm the guy. I'm the hero here." And I think that's what we're looking at. So, thanks for watching, though. Have a good morning.